Welcome to the Hospital Finance Podcast, your go-to source for information and insights that can help you stay ahead of the challenges impacting healthcare finance. And now, the host of the Hospital Finance Podcast, Michael Passanante.
Hi, this is Mike Passanante, and welcome back to the award-winning Hospital Finance Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be diving into the revenue cycle, not only looking at the steps that are involved there, but what's really changing and what's evolving and what might need to change at your facility to stay one step ahead. And joining me on the program to talk about this is Olga Barone-Allan, who is the Senior Manager of Onboarding and Reporting here at BESLER. Olga, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you again for inviting me.
So when you say the revenue cycle process, what do you mean when you think about that term?
So the revenue cycle process is the pretty much a lifeline of a patient's experience at a facility, at a provider facility. And it really impacts the financial oversight and management of patient services. Not only does it tie into the financial viability, but it also the quality of the patient's experience throughout the beginning to the end, and we can go into a little bit more detail as we go further into the process.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here. So the first thing that happens typically is that the provider is going to receive notice that some type of a service is needed, and what happens from there?
So, and right now we're specifically speaking inpatient, but please keep in mind there are different types of services at a facility. But for inpatient purposes, we'll use that as an example. A patient goes to a doctor, and the doctor says, you need surgery or some kind of procedure. So you're handed a script, the doctor calls in the service at the facility, and then the ball begins to roll.
Got it. So let's talk about how that looks from the patient's perspective, because probably at that point they're going to be encountering the scheduling system or a scheduler, and of course there's some difficulties that can be encountered in that part of the process as well.
That is correct. And different facilities use different methodologies. So the ideal facility would have a scheduling department, and what they would do is the physician would provide the schedulers a list of all the procedures that are being scripted or written out to be performed, and the schedulers would contact the patients and get all the information needed, and starting with insurance information, address, demographics, and so on and so forth. So they start preparing the visit and the charts to build on for the patient, and then schedule the date for the procedure.
And of course, there's a lot that goes on there, and expectations are changing too. People are looking for online scheduling, right? Not just talking to a human.
Absolutely, online scheduling is a big thing, and not all facilities do provide that. The other thing is, now a lot of hospitals are stressed with the fact of collecting deductibles and co-pays up front before the services is even provided, depending on the insurance. So after the scheduling is performed, it goes through another pre-certification with the insurance, depending on the insurance, and we can focus really on Medicare. But just for today's podcast. So, you have your deductible, your, copay, so you know what the patient already has to prepare. So you have to prepare the patient either to have a credit card, and that's very difficult, because the patient is at that point in time is a bit stressed about the whole procedure. The patient may have a secondary insurance to Medicare. Patient may not have a secondary insurance. They may have to be screened for charity care or Medicaid. So a lot goes involved in the eligibility. So after being scheduled, pre-certified, then the eligibility process begins also. And that's all in preparation for the upcoming procedure.
So let's talk about that. We've successfully gotten the patient scheduled at this point. What happens next in the revenue cycle?
So usually what will happen is the patient will come in for pre-testing either 24 hours before or a couple of days before, and then the day of the procedure they will come in through registration or admission. And again, they are there are different schools of thought, but most facilities they will ask for the demographics and the insurance information all over again, just to make sure that they have, especially with the MBI coming into effect. The procedure could have been scheduled prior to the MBI being released to the patient, so they need to get a copy of the Medicare information. Also, they need to verify that the service is a covered service by Medicare. And if it isn't, they need to get what's called an advanced beneficiary notice and have that signed by the patient. And that really is a non-covered service that the patient would have to pay out of pocket.
And let's pause there, because there are some other issues that can come up for Medicare patients. They could be Medicare Advantage, or they could, there's other flavors, right?
Absolutely. There is more and more push with Medicare Advantage. There was just an open enrollment, I believe it's mid-January. Open enrollment, is closed, and Medicare has been pushing more and more to have patients go with Medicare Advantage. So it depends if the hospital is out of network. So if the procedure was scheduled prior to the Medicare managed care being, effective, admission at that point would have to then go through the entire process of making sure that the procedure is covered or not.
Okay. And so now we move along to, if it's an inpatient admission, utilization review. So tell us about that.
So utilization management and case management, although they seem that they're the same, one is a retroactive prevention of denials and one is a concurrent prevention of denials. So while the patient is there, they make sure that the services that the patient is receiving is it is covered. So what happens is they are in constant contact with the insurance company and with the physician to make sure that as services are being rendered, the insurance is up to date, and that the physician is communicating, through them to the insurance all the services that are provided, so that there's no surprises at the end when the claim is billed for, and the service or the whole entire claim could be denied.
Okay. And now we're getting into that phase what's popularly known as the mid-revenue cycle, and we've seen in our own research where providers sort of freely say this is a very vulnerable area. This is an area that can cause material impact on our reimbursement. And in this area, you're looking at charge capture, you're looking at coding. Tell us what's going on there, what can go wrong.
So the patient is discharged, hopefully going home to heal, and behind the scenes, the machines are in motion. Each department, clinical department, each lab, X-ray, pharmacy is required to submit all their charges, post their charges into the mainframe system, usually, and again, everybody has a different school of thought, but for an inpatient, the best practice is to hold a claim for 10 days to allow all these various departments to be able to post their individual charge and to capture everything. Making sure the charge master is always current, that the pricing is always current. That is a constant. That's part of the revenue cycle in general, a huge responsibility. So to make sure that all these charges are on the claim within the 10 days is very tedious. You have to go through the charts, make sure that every single Band-Aid, aspirin, lab work, pre-post procedure is posted to the account. If this isn't done and the bill is not held up within the system, what could happen is what we refer to as late charges. Late charges could have a huge impact to the reimbursement. In certain cases, those late charges, it wouldn't matter because an inpatient is assigned a DRG, so the calculation of that late charge wouldn't really make an impact on your final reimbursement. But there are times that a late charge could impact the DRG assignment and cause a financial loss to the facility. The other thing is what is referred to DNFB, discharge not final bill. If the claim is on hold for either a code or a modifier, that becomes an age trial balance in itself. That DNFB can grow, the receivables could grow, you risk timely filing. So it's a whole record keeping of this hidden receivable, not hidden so much, but a receivable that has to be managed by the various departments, HIM, lab, PFS, patient financial services, admission, anything that can be prevented, and usually hospitals that are on top of that and run that type of an age trial balance, coordinate weekly meetings to discuss, what is preventing that bill from dropping from the main system.
Assuming we get the bill out the door, we're posting the payment. So how should that work?
So it's funny you say that, but there is a step in between. So the DNFB is one process of the claims being held up, and that's in the mainframe. Once the bill does drop from the mainframe, then it goes into what's called a billing scrubber. And the billing scrubber, which is the mechanism or the system that bills out to the providers, could have its own unbilled pockets. And it's more related to the billing edits that the system mainframe does not have. So there could be condition codes that are needed. That wouldn't be so much in the mainframe, it would be in the billing scrubber. And the patient financial services is mainly involved in that. And they have to monitor that on a daily basis and route those claims back to HIM or the lab or the pharmacy for J codes. So there's a lot of monitoring. And then the bill goes out. After all that is done, the bill goes out. If we're lucky, Medicaid, Medicare, they'll pay quickly, but then you have, the insurance plans that are much more in a delay process. You would hope 15, 30 days, and then payments are received. Payments are usually received electronically, but there are times that they are not. Some facilities still receive them by voucher, and then the cash posters are posting them manually. But if it's automated, they will receive the electronic, check with the detail and upload it into their mainframe system and then post it against the patient's account. And it reconciles. And then if there's a balance, a partial payment, those kick out to a follow-up. Or if there's a denial, those are routed to denial management and so on.
So that was a quick spin around the revenue cycle. And as we've gone through this, you did note some best practices related to technology. So I wanted to ask you to share those recommendations with our audience.
So in my experience, information technology, IT, is the patient accounting's best friend. Getting them involved in, patient financial services and working together with IT and automating a lot of the processes, and also working with the departments, but mainly with IT to ensure that there are automated algorithms, that there are workflows within the mainframe that will create reports based on reason and route them back to the responsible department so that they can clear up whatever's preventing a claim from dropping. And sometimes there are also limitations that the mainframe, Epic or Meditech, is not capable of handling. So those are what needs to be filled in with the billing scrubber. And IT is usually a big support network in trying to get those codes translated into the billing scrubber.
Excellent, Olga. Well, as good as hospitals have gotten their revenue cycle processes, certainly none are perfect, I'm sure, and most would freely admit that to you. So if you are in the provider community and you're interested in looking at things like underpayment recovery, whether that relate to DRG validation or transfer DRG or any number of other items along the revenue cycle, drop us a line at info@BESLER.com. We'd be happy to have that discussion with you. And if you'd like to read a blog post that gets into even more depth around this topic, you can go to BESLER.com, head up to the Insights tab and look for revenue cycle, and you'll see a blog post with associated content around this particular topic. Olga, thanks so much for joining us again today on the show.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity.
This concludes today's episode of the Hospital Finance Podcast. For show notes and additional resources to help you protect and enhance revenue at your hospital, visit BESLER.com/podcasts. The Hospital Finance Podcast is a production of BESLER. Smart about revenue, tenacious about results.